Did you know that over around 90% of our audience watches our videos but hasn't subscribed yet? If you enjoy these stories and want to see more, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It only takes a second and it helps us create more amazing content for you. I never imagined I would be in this position, looking back at the choices I made and wondering how things could have been different. If you had asked me a few years ago if I was happy, I would have said yes without hesitation. My husband, Mark, and I had built a life together that, from the outside, looked perfect. We had a nice home, steady jobs, and a relationship that had withstood the test of time. But life isn't always what it seems on the surface, and sometimes what appears solid is slowly crumbling from the inside. Mark and I had been married for 10 years. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and married young, believing that our love was strong enough to weather anything. And for a while, it was. We supported each other's dreams, encouraged each other's ambitions, and built a partnership that felt unbreakable. But as the years passed, things began to shift. Mark's career took center stage, and I found myself playing a supporting role in my own marriage. He had always been ambitious, driven in a way that both inspired me and exhausted me. He worked long hours, always chasing the next promotion, the next opportunity, the next success. At first, I admired his dedication. I told myself it was all for us, for our future, and that the sacrifices we made were temporary. But temporary turned into years, and I started to feel like an afterthought in his world. It wasn't that Mark was a bad husband. He wasn't cruel or unkind. He never raised his voice or did anything that could be labeled as outright neglect. But there was an absence, an emotional distance that grew wider with each late night at the office, each missed dinner, each moment where I felt like I was living a life parallel to his rather than with him. I tried to talk to him about it, to tell him how I was feeling, but he always had the same answer. I'm doing this for us. And for a long time, I believed him. Then I met Daniel. Daniel was Mark's boss, a senior executive at the company where Mark worked. The first time I met him was at a company gala, one of those fancy corporate events where spouses were expected to attend, dressed in their best, smiling and making polite conversation with people we barely knew. I had been to a dozen of these over the years, and they had all blurred into one another. But that night was different. Daniel had a presence that was impossible to ignore. He wasn't just a man in charge. He was the kind of person who could command a room without even trying. He was charismatic, effortlessly confident, and, unlike so many people at that event, genuinely interested in the people around him. When Mark introduced us, I expected the usual pleasantries, but Daniel surprised me. He didn't just shake my hand and move on. He engaged me in conversation, asking about my career, my interests, my life beyond being Mark's wife. It had been so long since someone had looked at me, not just seen me standing there, but really looked at me and asked about me, not as an extension of my husband, but as my own person. We talked for a long time that night, longer than I should have allowed myself. And when Mark eventually pulled me away, I felt a strange sense of disappointment, as if I had been yanked out of a space where, for the first time in a long time, I truly existed. At the time, I told myself it was nothing, just a pleasant conversation with a kind man. But in the days and weeks that followed, I found myself thinking about Daniel more than I should have. It wasn't attraction, at least not in the way most people would assume. It was something deeper, a feeling of being understood, of being acknowledged. And once I recognized that feeling, I couldn't ignore how absent it had been in my marriage for so long. The next time I saw Daniel, it wasn't planned. I was at a coffee shop downtown, a quiet place where I like to escape with a book and a cup of tea. I had just settled into my usual corner when I heard someone say my name. Looking up, I saw Daniel standing there, holding a coffee cup, smiling at me in that easy way of his. He asked if he could join me, and before I could think better of it, I said yes. We talked for over an hour about life, about work, about the things that made us who we were outside of the roles we played in our jobs and marriages. I told him about my frustrations, about the loneliness I felt even in a house that was supposed to be my home. He listened, not just with the polite nods and half-hearted responses I had grown used to, but with real attention. And when he spoke, he didn't try to fix anything or offer empty reassurances. He just understood. That conversation became the first of many. It started with chance encounters, then turned into occasional emails, just friendly exchanges about books, about music, about anything and everything that made the day feel a little less mundane. Then came the texts. Simple messages at first. A good morning here. Hope your day is going well there. But each one carried something unspoken, something that lingered longer than it should have. I told myself it was innocent. After all, we weren't doing anything wrong. We weren't meeting in secret. We weren't crossing any obvious lines. But deep down, I knew the truth. The way my heart raced when I saw his name on my phone, the way my day felt brighter when I heard from him, the way I started to feel like myself again when I was talking to him. These were things I hadn't felt in years. The real turning point came at another company event. Mark, as always, was busy networking, shaking hands, making deals. I found myself standing alone near the edge of the room, nursing a glass of wine, feeling like a guest in my own life. And then Daniel was there, standing beside me, looking at me with the same quiet understanding he always did. "You don't have to pretend," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. And for the first time that night, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I had been holding. We talked, just like we always did, but this time it felt different. More charged, more fragile, more like we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't name. And when the night ended and I went home with Mark, lying beside him in bed, I realized something that shook me to my core. This wasn't just a friendship anymore. This wasn't just harmless conversation. This was something more. And I had no idea what to do about it. The following weeks felt like walking a tightrope. Every interaction with Daniel carried an unspoken weight, a tension that neither of us acknowledged out loud, but both felt acutely. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I could control this, that nothing had to change. But the truth was, everything already had. It wasn't just about the stolen moments or the lingering looks. It was about how Daniel made me feel. Like I was someone worth listening to, someone whose thoughts and emotions mattered. And once you feel that kind of recognition, it's impossible to unfeel it. One afternoon, I found myself standing outside Daniel's office building. I wasn't sure why I'd come. Maybe I just wanted to see him in a different setting, to remind myself that this was real, that he wasn't just an escape I had imagined. But as I stood there, my phone buzzed. A message from him. "Are you free for a coffee?" My fingers hovered over the screen, hesitating. And then without thinking, I typed back, "Yes." I had no idea what I was stepping into. The weeks that followed felt like a balancing act between my reality and the secret world I had unintentionally stepped into. Every interaction with Daniel carried an unspoken weight, a tension neither of us acknowledged aloud, but both felt in every glance, every word, every moment we found ourselves alone. I told myself I was being dramatic, that this was nothing more than a harmless friendship. But deep down, I knew better. The truth was, everything had already changed. It wasn't just about the stolen conversations or the way my heart raced when I saw his name light up my phone screen. It was about how he made me feel like I was someone worth listening to, someone whose thoughts and emotions mattered. That kind of recognition, once felt, was impossible to ignore. One afternoon, I found myself standing outside Daniel's office building, staring up at the towering glass windows reflecting the bright city skyline. I wasn't sure why I had come. Maybe I just wanted to see him in a different setting, to remind myself that this was real, that he wasn't just an idea I had conjured up in my loneliness. But as I stood there, debating whether to turn around and leave, my phone buzzed. A message from him. "Are you free for a coffee?" My fingers hovered over the screen, hesitating. And then, without thinking, I typed back, "Yes." As I made my way to the cafe where we had first spoken alone, my mind swirled with doubts. What was I doing? Why was I going? But no matter how much I tried to rationalize my decision, the truth remained. I wanted to see him. When I arrived, Daniel was already there, waiting at a table near the window. He smiled when he saw me, that same warm, understanding smile that had become both my comfort and my undoing. As I sat down, he didn't waste time with small talk. "You seem lost," he said gently. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "I think I am," he nodded, as if he already knew. "And what are you looking for?" I wanted to tell him I didn't know, that I was just tired, just lonely, just trying to find something to make sense of the emptiness I felt. But deep down, I did know. I was looking for something I couldn't name, something I had lost in my marriage, in my life, in myself. We talked for over an hour. Unlike our past conversations, this one felt heavier, more delicate, like we were both aware of the line we were towing. "I don't want to be this person," I admitted finally, staring into my untouched coffee. "You're not a bad person," he said. "You're just searching." He was right. I wasn't here because I wanted to betray Mark. I was here because I had been feeling invisible for so long that when someone finally saw me, I couldn't look away. But even as I told myself that this was innocent, I knew I was only half believing it. In the days that followed, my thoughts became a tangled mess of guilt and longing. I tried to throw myself into my marriage, to rekindle what had once been there. I made Mark's favorite meals, asked about his day, tried to initiate conversations that went beyond work and responsibilities. But he was always too busy, too tired, too preoccupied. "Everything okay?" he asked one evening as he sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just a long day." He nodded absently, already half distracted. And that was the moment I realized it wasn't just that Daniel was making me feel seen, it was that Mark had stopped seeing me altogether. I told myself I had to stop. I had to put distance between me and Daniel before I crossed a line I couldn't come back from. But every time I tried, something pulled me back. A text from him checking in, a moment of weakness where I found myself replying, a meeting at a company event where our eyes locked across the room, and I knew he felt it too. One evening, Mark came home late, as usual. He barely looked at me as he set his briefcase down and loosened his tie. "Long day?" I asked. "Yeah," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "I'm exhausted." I wanted to tell him that I was exhausted too, that I had spent my entire day questioning my own feelings, wondering how I had gotten here, feeling guilt over something that hadn't even happened. But I didn't, because I knew he wouldn't hear me. Instead, I nodded, pretending everything was fine, pretending I wasn't unraveling inside. The next day, Daniel called me. Not a text, not an email, a call. "I need to see you," he said. His voice was steady, but there was something else in it, something unspoken, something that mirrored the storm inside me. I hesitated. Daniel, just to talk, he said quickly. Nothing more. I promise I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe myself. But when I agreed to meet him, I knew, deep down, that I was stepping further into something I wasn't sure I could walk away from. That evening, I drove to a small park just outside the city where Daniel had asked me to meet him. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the trees, making everything feel softer, quieter, like the world had paused just for us. Daniel was already there, leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, watching me as I approached. There was something different in his expression, something careful, measured, as if he was weighing every word before speaking. I know this is dangerous, he said, finally, his voice low. But I can't seem to stay away. I swallowed hard. Neither can I. For a long time, we just stood there, the silence stretching between us, thick with everything we weren't saying. We don't have to do this, he said after a moment. I met his gaze, searching for some kind of answer, some kind of resolution to the chaos in my mind. I don't know how to stop, I admitted. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming in the fading light. Then maybe we don't. I should have walked away. I should have ended it right then and there. But instead, I just stood there, heart pounding, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. The days that followed were a blur of emotions: guilt, excitement, fear, longing. Every time I told myself to stop, something pulled me back. Every time I tried to create distance, the weight of my feelings pushed me closer. Daniel and I had crossed a line. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, we had stepped into something neither of us could undo. I replayed that moment in the park over and over in my mind. The way he had looked at me, the way I had felt standing in front of him, knowing that if I took one more step, everything would change. I hadn't taken that step, but I had wanted to, and that was enough to unravel me. I told myself it had to end. That night, I lay awake in bed next to Mark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing. I remembered the early days of our marriage, when we had whispered to each other in the dark, sharing secrets, dreams, fears. Now, there was only silence between us. The next morning, I picked up my phone and typed out a message to Daniel. We can't do this. I'm sorry. I hit send before I could change my mind. My heart pounded as I waited for his response. It came almost immediately. I understand, but if you ever need to talk, I'm here. It should have what felt like relief. It didn't. The days stretched on, each one heavier than the last. I threw myself into my marriage, trying to reignite something that felt long gone. I planned date nights, asked about Mark's day, tried to bring us closer, but Mark was always distracted, always tired, always somewhere else in his mind. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, I finally spoke the words I had been holding in. Mark, are you happy? He looked up from his plate, startled. What? Are you happy? I repeated. He hesitated. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? I swallowed hard, because I don't know if I am. A silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Mark set down his fork, rubbing his temples. Is this about something specific, or? It's about everything, I admitted. I just feel like we're living separate lives, like we've stopped seeing each other. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. It's just life, you know? Work, stress, responsibilities. It happens. I waited for him to say more, to ask what we could do to fix it, to fight for us. But he didn't. That night, I lay in bed, staring at my phone. Daniel's last message still sitting there. I wanted to reply. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't. I was at a crossroads, and I had to decide which road to take. The next morning, I made a choice. I walked into Mark's home office, where he was already buried in emails. He barely looked up as I entered. "I think we need help," I said. His fingers froze over his keyboard. "Help?" "Marriage counseling," I clarified. "I think we need to talk to someone." Mark let out a sigh, leaning back in his chair. "Come on, is it really that bad?" I met his gaze, my heart pounding. "It is for me." For the first time in a long time, something shifted in his expression, a flicker of realization, of concern. He studied me, as if truly seeing me for the first time in months. "Okay," he said, finally. "If that's what you need, we'll do it." Relief flooded through me. I didn't know if counseling would fix everything. I didn't know if Mark and I could find our way back to each other, but I knew I had to try. And as I walked away, I made one last decision. I deleted Daniel's number, not because he wasn't important, not because he hadn't changed something in me, but because if I wanted to save my marriage, I couldn't keep holding on to what ifs. It was time to choose my future, and this time I chose Mark.